Que vuelta serie! On today's video, we're going to be looking at the best rural country places for Latinos in Florida. Latinos are usually looking for affordability. Unfortunately, when it comes to places to live, the more affordable the place is, the more it sucks. Now, when it comes to a rural area that's Hispanic, there's only so many to pick from in the state of Florida. There is a great selection of suburban and urban areas that are predominantly Latino, but when you talk about rural areas, there's far less. On top of that, agriculture in Florida is oranges, sugarcane, tomatoes, industries that pay the absolute worst. So a lot of these communities aren't exactly desirable places to live, but nonetheless, people are looking to live in rural areas when they're Hispanic, and these are the 10 largest and most known Hispanic rural communities in the state of Florida. We're going to start off in Collier County, that's the Naples area, talking about a community known as IMMOKALEE. Now, IMMOKALEE has historically been a poor agriculture-based community where tomatoes, sugarcane, and other agricultural industries that really don't have any future have attracted Mexicans many years ago, but today it's mostly Haitians and Guatemalans. Number 10 on our list is IMMOKALEE, Florida. Many of the longtime residents here are of Mexican origin. There are some Salvadorians, there are some Hondurans, but nowadays it's mostly been Guatemalans and Haitians who are moving to this community. So a lot of the most established businesses and families are going to be of Mexican origin. This city offers great selection of restaurants, and many people from Naples travel to IMMOKALEE to get their hands on good, authentic Mexican food. There's also a casino here, which probably does very little for the community. The schools here are not the worst, but they're definitely not the best. Collier County is known as a good school district. However, they don't really seem to care too much about the IMMOKALEE area. So it's not as good as Naples, even though it's in the same county. When it comes to the schools, I've heard that there are some great teachers, and some teachers run some great programs to help all of their students. Now, I went through the Collier County school system myself as a Hispanic, and it was very difficult. A lot of teachers were prejudiced, but this was in the Naples area where it's more suburban. If you end up in IMMOKALEE, it's a poor farming community. A lot of the parents don't know how to read. I mean, the amount of literacy here between the adults is pretty much some of the lowest you're going to find in the United States. So it creates a difficult situation for the school systems who want the parents to be more active with the kids, but the parents just don't come from a background of education. Good teachers, but the district possibly doesn't care about this area as much. Number 9 is Montura Ranch. Not too far from IMMOKALEE. This is actually a Clewiston address. Montura Ranch is mostly Cuban, Venezuelans, and a few Mexicans. There's kind of a mix of people here. There's even Brazilians, Chileans, Argentinians, but the largest group out here is going to be Cubans, and this is one of the largest rural Cuban predominant communities that you're going to find in the United States. It's really a poor place that has been plagued with theft. Illegal crime organizations try to hide out here. What they've had a problem with is criminal groups from Miami moving into here to hide whatever the crap they're doing from Miami. Stashed stolen dump trucks, stashed, everything you could think of happens here. But there's still a core community here that's trying to do the best they can. They've opened up Cuban and Mexican restaurants. Sometimes they fail. It's a tough place. Moving on to number 8 is DADE City. This is north of Tampa, and it's predominantly a Mexican community. The first time I ended up in this town was because my Mexican friend who lives in Spring Hill told me to check out a Mexican restaurant here called Del Carmen. It's possibly one of the best Mexican restaurants in the state of Florida. There are many Mexican restaurants in the downtown's main strip, as well as food trucks. There's a huge Mexican community here. But again, this is a rural, southern, poor agricultural town. There's not really a lot of prospects in this area. The only good thing that this area has is that as Tampa continues to grow, places like Dade City, which were outlying towns, are now being swallowed up by the suburbs, which means that they can expect a lot more investment in their community in the future, which might bring a little bit more money to the area and perhaps newer developments, which could lead to better schools in the future. Moving on to number 7, FELLSMERE. This is outside of Sebastian, Florida. If I'm correct, the schools here are still part of the Vero Beach area or Sebastian area, which are good schools because this community, last time I checked, wasn't big enough to have its own school, so the kids are still going into town. This is a rural district outside of Sebastian and Vero Beach, Florida. Because of agriculture and farming, there has always been an established Mexican American community here. And nowadays, they're shifting over into trucking, dump trucks, and other sorts of economical entrances, since farming, of course, is never the best way to make a living. This is predominantly a Mexican-American community, and it is nice. There's good restaurants as expected. There are not too many Mexican-American communities on the east coast of Florida, so this is kind of a rare exception. I have family that moved to this area, so I was actually inside of the school system here, helping somebody get registered, so it seemed like a great school back then. Number 6 is WIMAUMA, Florida. This is outside of the Tampa area. It is predominantly a Mexican community. They have some of the best Mexican food in the entire state of Florida, and I love to go here for their Mexican food. However, in recent history, there's been a lot of trouble with this town. And if you look on the news, you may have heard about a few recent things that happened here. Pretty much recently, this little Florida town made national news because of the size of some of the seizures they had. There's also a song on the internet about WIMAUMA in Spanish. Nonetheless, not everybody here is into crime. These are some hard-working people, gente trabajadora. And a lot of the people from WIMAUMA who have improved economically are now living in Parish, Lakewood Ranch, Sun City Center. So a lot of the suburban areas around WIMAUMA are starting to have a lot of kind of better off economically Mexican people, but WIMAUMA remains like the town buena comida. Number 5 is Lehigh Acres, Florida. Saludo a toda la gente linda de Lehigh. There's a Cuban, Mexican, Salvadorian, Honduran community here, and there's also a lot of Puerto Ricans. There's the town center, which is kind of more urban. There's a great Puerto Rican place called Gandules Grill, one of the best Puerto Rican restaurants in Florida. The outlying area, the outskirts of Lehigh, places like Buckingham and the north side of Lehigh and the east side of Lehigh are still pretty much undeveloped. They're starting to bring in a lot of homes, and the vast majority of these homes are being bought up by Latinos. A lot of people from Miami are starting to move here as well, looking for affordability. The schools are absolutely horrendous with a lot of teenage delinquency. The good thing is that you can ride your ATV through most of these communities without a problem. Most construction is new, and the infrastructure here sucks. You're on septic tank, well water, and they're not really putting a lot of roads or work. You're going to have to commute to Fort Myers or Naples. Moving on to number 4, WAUCHULA. This is right outside of Sarasota, and it is a rural community. Again, farming is the main source of income here for a lot of people, and it really wasn't established as a wealthy community. It was established kind of around farming. WAUCHULA is a great, clean, safe town. The community gets together and does a lot of events. If you're Mexican, you'll probably like this area a lot. There's also now a lot of Guatemalans moving in, especially in Sulphur Springs to the south. If you want to live in a small American vibe type of town, but still have a large Hispanic community, this is one of the few places where you're going to find it. This is not really a fancy or rich place. It's a small rural town, but it's got very good statistics on use, are very low. It seems like a great community still to this day, and it's one of my favorite small towns in Florida. Very serene, very quiet little place to live. Moving on to number 3, Port LaBelle. Right outside of LaBelle, Florida is Port LaBelle, which is a large subdivision being built outside of LaBelle, Florida. This county is one of the few counties in Florida where the vast majority of people are Hispanic. Mexicans are the historic community that's been here, but now there's a lot of Cubans moving in. You're gonna find great Mexican food, great Guatemalan food. I think now they have 2 Cuban restaurants and I think another Cuban food truck, plus people who randomly sell Cuban food out of their house. So if you're into Latin culture, this place has it. I really like the town of LaBelle, but teenage delinquency is a problem here, and some of the people that are from here are a little bit hostile to the growth. That's why most people moving in are moving into the Port LaBelle area, which is the newer area, and not the historic town square area. The area does not offer a lot of opportunity. Most of the growth here has been revolving around the idea of affordability. Number 2 is the Golden Gate Estates. This is outside of Naples, Florida. This is an area where the Hispanic community has had a lot of tensions with the locals. The people that are originally from here don't like the Hispanics that are moving in. They don't like the New Yorkers that are moving in. They don't like themselves. How can they like other people when they don't even like themselves? Their opinion hasn't stopped the growth, and while there is a huge tension between the Cubans and the rednecks out here, there's even a case on the news right now where somebody put up signs so that their neighbor couldn't sell their house. It's a lot of bad stuff going on with tensions here, but nonetheless, it's a huge Cuban and Colombian community out there. Being outside of Naples, the schools are not bad. Like Palmetto Ridge doesn't have a bad reputation. Nowadays, there's even Publixes being built out there. A lot of stores are coming in. This area used to have nothing. It was the boondocks. But now with so much growth, it's starting to get a lot of good conveniences. It's rural, but it's almost turning into suburban. It's a great place to live. A lot of Latinos out there. Moving on to number 1, the best Hispanic rural community in Florida is Homestead. Now, I'm not referring to the city of Homestead. That's where all of the farm workers live. I'm talking about the area north of Homestead that is unincorporated. It's a huge area, predominantly Latino. There are some Asians moving in because they're really into like the tropical gardening. I've seen a lot of Vietnamese and Cambodians move to this area just looking to be able to grow their mangoes and bananas and other types of fruits like dragon fruit. This is one of the most beautiful agricultural lands in the country, and people have some huge, beautiful estates out there. It's not affordable. This area is one of the most expensive places you're going to find in Florida as well. And you may have heard that Homestead is dangerous and it's got a lot of crime. Again, that's mostly the city limits of Homestead. When you get out into the estates, it's beautiful out there. All right, guys, I hope you guys liked this video, and I hope this video can help a lot of people who are thinking about moving in Florida or from within Florida, tired of the big cities, looking for small towns. A lot of these small towns have a vastly growing Hispanic community, and they're going to become better places as businesses come in. A lot of infrastructure and growth is planned for these areas, and I really wish them the best as they try to find the best place for them and their family, as a lot of Hispanics also want to live in rural places. People have the notion that Hispanics and Asians like to live in urban areas. We don't like to live in urban areas. We have to live in urban areas for our safety. Look at me. My wife is American. We moved all the way to Alabama to move to a rural place, and we had to leave because the people were so hostile towards us for being Hispanic. I'm going to make one more recommendation, actually 2 more for you guys. This place didn't make our list because it's so small, but there's a small community called Pioneer. It's between LaBelle and Clewiston, off of Highway 80 north of Montura. This little area called Pioneer doesn't even show up on maps, but there's a lot of Cubans, Colombians, and just a lot of South Americans, Mexicans, Cubans. There's all types of Latinos here, and there's a lot of agriculture. There's people doing tilapia farms. I have met a Colombian guy who had like a bunch of cattle here. This is really like a really cool, just a lot of people move out here just so they can grow cattle and goats and animals. I think I've also had Salvadorians and Honduran friends that moved out here at some point. So it's a very Latino, diverse rural community. I think the plots there are like 5 acres. Great place to invest with land as well. There's been talk of Clewiston eventually getting an airport to help kind of substitute the traffic out of Miami. And if that ever happens, this area will be very important as there'll be a lot of growth. I think this area is going to have growth regardless. Pioneer is a great community. I think the only restaurants they have is like a gas station that's got like a Gator Shack or something, and the food wasn't even all that great. It's really isolated. There's not much out there. Or you can run back in the flagpole and there's a pizza place outside of Montura. So there's not a lot to do out here, but it is affordable, it is quiet, it is rural, and there's a huge Latino community in this little area. Not exactly in Florida, but as soon as you cross the Florida line into Georgia, there's this place called Moultrie. Moultrie, Moultrie. That community is now 5% Cuban. I think there was like a packing plant or like a meat processing plant or something like that. So a lot of Cubans ended up moving there for the jobs there. These aren't great paying jobs, but people from Miami moved up there, bought houses, and now there's like a growing community of Cubans right there off of Interstate 75 as soon as you cross into Georgia. I've got a few friends that have lived there over the years. They really like it. It's kind of country, very rural, and they're establishing a small Cuban community. I think there's 2 Cuban restaurants in Moultrie, Georgia. A lot of people of Puerto Rican descent are moving into the Orlando area. I'm not going to touch on that because they're spread out through a huge area and it would just make this video endlessly complicated. But a lot of them are picking this place called Marion Oaks, southwest of Ocala. The place is kind of almost suburban as well. It doesn't really have that country feel. If you know any areas around the Orlando area that are Hispanic and country, let me know and we could definitely touch on this topic again in the future. I just didn't want to elaborate on it because Puerto Ricans are just kind of thinly spread through this whole area. So they're not really like specific communities that are rural that are getting a lot of Puerto Ricans. It's more like a thin spread of the population, and the areas that do have a lot of Puerto Ricans are urban areas, so it's been difficult to really include Orlando into this list. But that's today's video. I hope you guys liked it.